Well, y'all bring it in. We have another War Report Wednesday with our good friend Mike Gittens, the co-founder and a co-host of the War Report. If you aren't subscribed to them on YouTube, you're wrong. Let's get some stuff going on. Speaking of stuff that didn't go necessarily our way, now we did predict in Athens that Auburn was going to be the underdog.
Yeah.
Your overall reaction, though, Mike, a lot of things, there were some head-shaking moments there, but what did you take away from the performance in Athens?
Surprisingly, they did better in Athens than they've done in the last 6 years since 2018. Now, for our listeners' perspective, Auburn has given up about 484 yards of total offense to Georgia on average in Athens since 2018. On Saturday, they only gave up 381 yards of total offense. Offensively, they've gained an average of 249 yards of offense against the Georgia Bulldogs. And on Saturday, they were over 330 yards of total offense. So they did better than they've been doing in Athens, certainly from a numbers perspective. But I think it was a common theme. And the theme is there are plays being left on the field.
Right.
So that's what we saw. Most notably, the 4th and 1.
That 4th and 1.
Talked about to death here. Hugh Freeze went to the post game and said that it was a dive left that was called, a halfback dive left. Peyton called an audible. The play went right. It had no chance going right.
There were like 3 Bulldogs in front of them at that point.
Yeah, pretty disappointing. But your quarterback is not on the same page. Hugh Freeze said, look, in hindsight, I wish I had called a timeout there because once I saw it wasn't going the way I called it, maybe we should have called a timeout there and reset. So Peyton had some different thoughts after the game on what was called there. And I think fans are starting to get a little frustrated, not only just with the losing, but with these kinds of things here for, you know, a 4th-year starting quarterback and an experienced SEC head coach.
I think you brought it up perfectly, saying that there are plays left on the table. And Coach Freeze mentioned it, kind of tying that into it. If we're not making those plays, we're not playing winning football.
Right.
And that seems like it's been a theme for these past couple weeks now. The frustration is visible there with Coach Freeze. Is there a way to work this out?
Yes, there is a way to work it out, but you've got to get your team on the same page. And your margin for error, we've talked about this, Rex, it's smaller than most teams, but Saturday was a day that will live in infamy in college football history. We saw Vanderbilt beat Alabama. We saw Arkansas beat a top 5 Tennessee team. We saw upsets everywhere. We saw Texas A&M beat Missouri.
To sleep.
Oh my goodness, it was absolute domination. I thought Missouri was a fraud, but look, they proved that they were frauds on Saturday.
Sure did.
And everybody's celebrating and figuring this out but Auburn right now. And you have the talent to do it, but you've got to close the coaching gap and you've got to close the scheme gap with other teams. Look, there was a 24.5-point spread, Auburn versus Georgia. I felt like there's no way that Georgia was going to cover 24.5 points versus this Auburn defense. They absolutely did not cover that game, so Auburn covered the spread. But that's what tells you this game should have been and could have been a lot closer at the end. On that 4th and 1, you're at the start of the 4th quarter. If you score on that drive, it's a 1-score game. Either an 8-point game because you kicked the field goal or a 4-point game because you scored a touchdown. And after that, it felt like all hopes of a comeback died with that 4th and 1.
And that's really frustrating to see. I think frustration has been the theme here. Hopefully you're right that everyone gets on the same page because there's so much talent on this team. Darkwood's Hunter, he scores every time in Athens, and it's.
I know he was frustrated with that 4th and 1 because he was supposed to get the ball.
He was supposed to get the ball. Give 27 the ball. He's been doing great, and he's a big dude anyway. He could probably barrel his way in for a couple more yards. Hopefully they get it figured out these next few seasons.
Well, he went into the 4th quarter with 91 yards on 11 rushes.
That's great.
He came out of the 4th quarter with 91 yards on 13 rushes.
I don't.
So, yeah, I mean, and probably should have had,
Which head do you want us? Which wall do you want our head to go through at this point? Just come on, man.
That's tough.
It's really tough. And we'll also talk, well, as you mentioned, the bigger picture. What in the Vandy happened in Nashville? Your overall reaction as a fan of the sport. Also, it helps that it happened against Alabama. Your reaction to Diego Pavia, we saw what he could do. Sorry to bring up some bad memories with New Mexico State, but for him to do it on a stage like Nashville in, 1 for 60, the Commodores are now against a top-ranked team. Your reaction to what happened there?
To contrast what happened in Nashville versus what's kind of happening on the Plains is you had a team that was overmatched from a talent perspective, and they executed perfectly the only game plan they possibly could have executed to beat a team like Alabama. Let me put this in perspective for you. Alabama scored 35 points, and they only had the ball for 17 minutes and 52 seconds in that game.
That's what? The math doesn't add up right there. That is wild.
Right. So if you look at what Vandy did, they won by playing keep away. They held the ball for 42 minutes against an Alabama team. They kept it out of Jalen Milroe's hands, but when they had it, they were scoring. And at the end, when they needed plays, they executed the plays as called to get the first downs to end the game. And it was an amazing performance by Vanderbilt. I think, if you're Diego Pavia, you've never been picked first at anything your whole life, and you just take down the #1 team in the country. I told everybody that would listen, Kalen DeBoer is not Nick Saban.
Yeah.
And if you saw the frustrations boil over, the young man Malachi Moore, he's since apologized, but his antics at the end of that game with his frustration of losing that, unacceptable. I don't think we'd ever have seen that from a Nick Saban coach to team. And if we had seen that, you'd seen some very strict discipline coming after. He embarrassed his school on a national stage. That absolutely cannot happen moving forward if you're Kalen DeBoer. But give Vandy credit. Give them credit. They executed their game plan. They held the ball. They pulled off a 1 in a million, beatdown. And there was a funny clip. I posted this to Twitter, but there's a funny clip of Lane Kiffin in his post game.
I saw this.
while the game is up, and he can't even answer questions because he's like, how many timeouts does Alabama have left? I'm sorry, this is like a once in a lifetime thing. It was, but we saw that across college football on Saturday. So not only was it Vanderbilt, like I said, Texas A&M joined the party. Watching Arkansas do what they did, they came into Jordan-Hare, got a win, but they validated that win by going and beating, a top 10 Tennessee team. Just amazing football being played, and it adds to the mystique of this first season of the 12-team college football playoff.
I'm absolutely loving it. I love kind of the chaos when it comes to October. Always delivers in college football. We've talked a lot about the headaches and the frustrations, but there is a win for Auburn football. A guy like Deuce Knight says yes to Auburn, and he's actually wearing number 2. There's a guy who wore number 2, did pretty well at Auburn.
Yeah, a lot of talk about that.
A lot of talk about that, but let's start off here. When you saw him commit, I know that you talked about this on the War Report as well, but how does this change Auburn's future, and what kind of excitement can we expect?
Well, I think it's a signal to other recruits that the plan is still in place, right? Auburn is close. If you're Deuce Knight, you're looking at what's happening at Auburn, and you're thinking, if I'm the quarterback, we get that 4th and 1. And that's how close Auburn is to a more positive result than the total wins and losses show right now, is that recruits are not jumping off the bandwagon. As a matter of fact, they more firmly believe now that they'll be the difference between an Auburn that contends for a national title and the Auburn that you see this season. So Hugh Freeze is continuing to sell that message. Deuce Knight's commitment represents the commitment to that vision, which is continue to get top-tier talent in here, improve what we're doing from a coaching perspective, and we're really, really close to something special. So Auburn desperately needed that news, Rex. I know Deuce was probably waiting to commit on the back of a win, and the win just didn't come, so he said, forget it. Just got to commit here and let other people know. And not only did he commit, he sent a clear message. He said to the other top recruits, Caleb Cunningham and Naheem Offord, the #1 player in the state of Alabama, guys, I'm coming for you. Come to Auburn, play with us. Let's do something special here on the Plains.
And thank goodness they found some kind of win for that weekend. Now, just real quick, I know a lot can be made about numbers.
Yeah.
Him wearing number 2 and him actually having several pictures with Cam Newton as well.
You know what? If you're Cam and you love Auburn, you let this happen. Right. They'll retire your number at some point.
But they have to, right?
Yeah. He's already got a statue outside the stadium.
Come on.
But right now, if that's the number that young man wants to wear and you feel like he's going to be the difference in your program, you let it happen. And I think that's what Auburn's spirit is all about. It's all about sharing. It's all about a commitment to the whole rather than the individual. Cam Newton obviously had a lot of individual awards at Auburn, but he also accomplished a lot from a team perspective, leading that team to a national title. He didn't play with a single other player on offense that got drafted in 2010.
Which is still one of the craziest stats I could ever think of.
But everybody wears that national title. So like I said, I love it. I love that he's gracious enough to say, listen, it's just a number, and if it's what Deuce wants, I think he should get it at this point. If you're Hugh Freeze, you need a quarterback.
Please.
You definitely need a quarterback. So Cam is willing to help.
That is awesome. War Cam Newton at that point. So Look, it's October. We're in the thick of college football, but my gosh, before we know it, the college basketball season is going to be here.
Yes.
So we're going to quickly touch on that. Bruce Pearl, obviously, Auburn is a nationally recognized basketball school now. What can we expect from this newest edition of Bruce Pearl's team?
Aiden Holloway left.
Yeah.
He went to Alabama, but they picked up J.P. Pegues, and look, this team should be better. Bruce Pearl teams have played excellent defense. You return Janai Broome, who is going to be one of the best players in college basketball next year. It's not even close. And you have an experienced squad. Denver Jones, is going to be a sharpshooter for Bruce Pearl on the outside. And Chaney Johnson, who came on late last season, filling in for Chad Baker at points, showed himself to be a formidable player in the SEC. He came from University of Alabama, Huntsville, and for a guy who come from a school like that and compete at this level in the SEC, it shows that Bruce Pearl has an eye for talent, and they'll go out and they'll get it wherever it's at. So you've got the young guys coming in, obviously the freshmen that we expect to do really, really well. But this should be one of Bruce Pearl's best teams ever. Now, last year he said that we would see the greatest distribution of minutes of any team he's ever coached, and that held true. However, you had Aiden come up short in that game versus Yale, where you lose by a couple points and he doesn't score a bucket. That's not going to happen this year, right? You've got experienced guys who are not going to fold under pressure. I hate to say it the way Aiden did, but they're going to help you. They're going to help you win those close games. Remember, this is a team that made a run and won the SEC tournament in Nashville last year. They returned the core of that squad. So Trey Donaldson went to Michigan, but his production, and he was a great teammate and he was a great player for Bruce Pearl, but you can replace what he did. And that's what they've done. So I think it's going to be a really good season for the Tigers on the Plains.
I think when you bring back a core, especially, we know how crazy the transfer portal can be in football. In basketball, it's almost on steroids, and it's really great to see that core come back. But another team that we've spoken off camera and we've seen, on Twitter as well, you've been praising this women's basketball team.
Yes.
A force, a new force. It's taken a little while, but Coach Johnny has been able to get the recruits that she finally needs. What can we expect from the women?
You can expect them to have the leading scorer in the SEC. It's probably going to be Talia Scott. She's dealing with a wrist injury right now, so she may miss a couple games to start the season. But in the non-conference, they need her ready for SEC play.
Right, when in the thick of that monster.
But quietly, their best player, I talked about their best scorer, but their best player may be Deanna Gaston. She's the transfer from Texas. She's got range. She can play the 4, the 5, the 3. She can shoot the ball. Just amazing upgrades for Johnny Harris here in her 4th year now on the Plains. Now, she's improved this squad every year for 3 years straight. Auburn absolutely is getting a discount on her. I think she's the lowest paid coach in the SEC right now.
Really?
Yes, and so she's in a contract year, and I expect her team to go even further than they did last year. Now, you're talking about a woman who took over a team, Rex, that won 0 SEC games the year before she took over. Right. They won 2 games in year 1. They won 5 games in year 2. And in year 3, they went 8-8 in the SEC.
It's pretty amazing.
Right, yeah. I'm looking for them to be in that kind of 10-6, maybe 12-4 range, depending on how the ball bounces. But certainly they're going to contend to be in that top 4 in the SEC this year if the ball bounces right. Yeah, she's a point guard away. If this team had a star point guard, I would bet the 401k on them to make the Sweet 16. So
that's a heck of an endorsement right there. And we know
they're really close.
In the SEC, a lot of air is taken up by LSU and South Carolina, rightfully so. But I think it's about time that we have another contender in the room.
With Texas and Oklahoma joining
Texas
the
and
conference.
Oklahoma too, yeah.
So you've got Texas, who's another national title contender, joining the conference there, and they're going to have to compete against them as well too. Ultimately, what it comes down to is there's an opportunity to win at Auburn now, right? But you've got to have the support. And that means NIL in today's college basketball, right? So even on the women's side, you've got to have the dollars if you want the top recruits. And, she's building a good core. There are 2 young freshmen that I want everybody to know about as well, too. Soraya Daniels, who is Marquise Daniels' daughter.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
He's assistant coach on the men's team, but he played at Auburn when I was in school in the early 2000s. And then you've got Jordan Hunter, who is the player of the year in high school in Alabama last year. Those girls are absolutely dynamite. Soraya is doing really well in camp right now, so I'm looking for her to contribute early. And so if you're Johnny Harris, it's not just about the girls you brought in from the portal, but you have some young girls who may be able to contribute early and may be surprises here in the SEC that nobody's talking about, but might end up being household names by the end of the year.
That's why we get Mike G. We're enlightened, we learn a little bit, and we have some fun here. Mike, before we go, we got to let people know every single time you're on here, where can they find the War Report?
Check us out on YouTube. We got a lot of great things going at the War Report. We're halfway through the football season already. Feels like we were just clamoring for it, and now it's almost over. But Auburn's on a bye week this week. We've got lots of great bye week content coming for our listeners. So check us out on YouTube and follow us on social media. Follow me on Twitter at Mike Gittens and at the War Report on every social media platform.
It's a good follow. Again, if you're not following them on YouTube or on Twitter, you're wrong. Get it right, y'all. Mike G for the War Report Wednesdays. We love these things. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thanks, Rex.